fluency. They give us models of fluent talk, fluent native and non-native talk, and display the characteristics of spoken language, which, you know, is quite important. If you're modeling language, you need to see how it's used in the real world by real people. So we teachers would call them dialogues. They're really conversations, but, you know, I'm using the term that we use in language teaching. So we find them in course books. We find them on live TV. We find them on TV series. We can steal snippets of dialogue. We find them on YouTube. We find them on the radio, on film. We find them transcribed in the literature, you know, in stories or novels. There is dialogue, which is usually maybe transcribed in a different way, but still, it's language, conversational language. We see them in plays, and also teachers create their own dialogue material. Yeah. Do you have any extra sources that I've missed out on? If you have, please type it in the text chat. I'm very happy to add to my slate. So why we use them? Some of the reasons which I already used, so I'm going to move ahead, and this is clearly a mistake. They are a source of all that I said on the previous slide, but they offer models of L2 talk that our learners can emulate. And also they give us the opportunity to develop our learners' listening skills, to give them grammar input, and to do pronunciation work with them. Yeah. So are there any other ways that you use dialogues in class? Do you use them for reading? If you do, they're probably not the best genre to use for reading skills development, but we do get our students to read them sometimes for purposes which I'm going to discuss later. I know that dialogues are not a new thing, and so I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but I am going to, I'm going to mute some people who are maybe having a little bit of background noise, if I may. Could I ask you to mute your microphones, because some of you have background noise? A little bit of background noise, thank you. Thank you so much. So some of the standard, some of the standard exercises that I'm sure you recognize involve modeling a dialogue. Do you do that? Do you drill dialogues? Do you get students to repeat them? Functional language, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Panise. Because they are contextualized in a situation, yes. We use them in order to get the learners to play act the dialogue. And by play act, I don't mean role play, which is kind of freer. We use them to get the learners to repeat the lines in a kind of actor's role. They dramatize the dialogue. We ask students to reorder the lines. We give the lines jumbled up. We get them to gap fill the dialogue, or we give them half a dialogue and we say, listen and fill the other half, or listen and predict the other half and then listen to it and check it. We get the learners to memorize dialogues, because memory engrams are quite important for acquiring whole chunks of language and being able to produce them and churn them out very quickly. Some teachers use them to read aloud, and we do get the learners to read them aloud for pronunciation practice, not for listening practice. Do you use any of these techniques yourself? Which technique do you use most with dialogues? Can you type in the text chat? Which one do you favor? Many of them. Some of you probably use all of them, because these are some pretty standard techniques. So I'm not going to talk about these ones. I'm going to try and introduce some new ones. All of them. course you would. So most of you know these techniques because they're standard for trained teachers. And I know many of you are very well trained people, because we did. And some of you will use most or all of them. So just a few, then let's start a few new activities here. Reorder lines, yes. This is a good activity because it focuses attention both on content and language. And you can get the learners to reorder the lines predictively and while listening then to check, right? So dialogue material is quite flexible and can be used in many different ways. So let me show you some new or alternative ways. If you know the way, say, I know this, but I'm not going to send you away because you know some of my techniques. Typically, we use, before you watch activities, we use speaking with dialogues. So for example, this is a conversation, an image from a situation where we will have a secretary and her boss who walks in, and we ask the students to imagine what her boss is about to say to the secretary. I'm not going to ask you to type up your answers here, but you know, you can imagine what a boss like that might say. They might say something like, you know, what are you doing there? Why aren't you doing your job? What are you listening to? And so, and what do you think she will reply? So we get the learners to imagine the conversation before they hear it. We also like to imagine, it's a good idea to imagine, get the learners to think what the people are saying. And a particularly good activity is to get them to watch a video without sound and to try and imagine a conversation. And you can ask them to take some notes while they're watching, imagine the conversation, and then act it out for us. Would you like to watch this video without sound? Okay, I'm going to play it without sound first. And then later we play it with sound. Yeah, you can imagine what is happening. This is the boss walking in, yeah. And she's quite quiet and relaxingly reading her little book. And we can imagine the conversation, okay? I don't want to play all of it because it might be a little bit boring, but we let the students watch the whole thing, and then we get them to imagine the conversation, and then look at the screen, what it says. So do you think it's going to be a pleasant conversation? Angela Kimo, may I make you a co-host, just in case there are some people in the waiting room? Because I'm focusing on my presentation and I might not be able to let them in. I don't mind. Do you mind doing that, or Penny or Penise or anyone? Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. So this is a typical activity that you may have learned in your videos, but it's quite productive because what you are instructed to do in video viewing activities is to get the learners to predict the content. What is this dialogue going to be about? But in this version, you want the learners to imagine the conversation, to create the conversation, and to act it out in front of the class before they actually hear the original. And the original is, I'm going to play it now because I'm going to use a couple of 2 or 3 similar conversations, because I don't want to give you a new conversation on every slide, so that at least you know some of them. So this is the original one.
Catherine.
Oh, good morning, madam.
Would you explain, please? What have you been doing all morning?
Well, madam, I've been typing, madam.
Typing? You haven't been typing. You've been reading that stupid novel since you got here. None of these letters are finished.
Well, madam, I've typed 3, madam. I have.
Oh, really? You have? Which ones?
E, and A, madam. I'm going to type R in a minute, too.
Oh, my goodness.
Ah, yes. Okay, this is a great activity. Yeah. They wrote the conversation and then they acted it out. Yeah, great. So this is a dialogue that was teacher created, and I filmed it because animation of dialogues, as I was going to mention earlier, is a great activity as well. But the medium in which this was animated is quite difficult, although quite exciting for anyone who wants to venture it. I did that with Coral Rainbow in Second Life, which is a virtual world. And the tall blonde secretary was my avatar, because in my Second Life appearance, I'm a tall blonde. So what can I say? Let me go on with my seminar because I am embarrassing myself here. So some of the other activities that you can do, obviously, you can get the learners to fill in the gaps. I mean, these are the standard activities: listen and fill in the gaps. Okay, and you can give them the answers, and then you can, I don't want you to play anymore. And you can show them the answers gradually and so on. And this was a lesson that you can see in which I taught them the difference between the present perfect continuous versus the present perfect simple, which is a pesky contrast for most teachers. And I first taught this dialogue to a group of 13-year-olds who actually got it so well that they embarrassed their teachers by confessing that they'd never been able to do it before. They got the joke, DENA, this was amazing. And finally, they were able to produce the dialogue themselves and act out similar ones. So these are some standard activities, obviously, that follow on creating the dialogue from scratch, Anise, listening to the original dialogue, comparing it, and then mining the dialogue for language. This one is the language analysis and getting them to think about the meanings and maybe discuss the meanings and even showing them a timeline. So mining the dialogue, conversational language for language is an activity we do as teachers because we're language teachers. We don't just teach skill, we teach language, and language means mining texts that we present for the language elements within the texts. So we get the learners to look at the ideas, maybe look at the timeline, thinking and discussing the main differences in terms of time, in terms of duration, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to ask you these questions because I know you know the answer. But then obviously you can extend the situation. For example, in this lesson, which is like almost I gave you a complete lesson plan, you encourage the learners to use the dialogue, the material, the present perfect continuous in these two situations. One is for someone who is really disgustingly late, or someone who's caught not doing what they're supposed to be doing when their parents or partner or husband walked in at home, and I will let you imagine the rest. So why we use dialogues, why we need all these activities, we need variety. And, you know, if we get the learners to listen and repeat the dialogue every day or listen and fill in the gaps, it's a bit boring. And you want to change focus in your lessons, you want to motivate them, you want to surprise them, because surprises are good and students love surprises. You want to add richness to your lessons, and you want to offer them more experiences with education material and more opportunities for cognitive engagement. Any questions? Do you agree or disagree? Give me a smile if you agree. Yes. So typically we have predictions, some ideas for predicting. I gave you one idea of play the video without sound, ideas, the dialogue, created, acted out, then listen to the original. This is from a film. Do you recall the film? Do you recognize the film? No, it's Notting Hill. It's one of the classic romantic rom-com. No, it's a romantic comedy, Notting Hill. And Anna is the main character, who is a famous Hollywood star, not stat. And Will is also the main character, and he's played by Hugh Grant. And he meets Anna, and he invites her to his sister's birthday party. So this is the situation described to the students. It doesn't matter if they've seen the film or not, because you're going to play that dialogue to them later. But before they hear it or watch it, you want them to create it, to imagine it. So look at the characters and the situation, obviously, and write 10 or to 12 lines of conversation during the first few minutes of this meeting. You have Will, you have Max, you have Anna. What kind of language do you predict they will write about? Even if you don't know the dialogue, you can predict some lines of dialogue, can't you? Can you write one line of dialogue that you think might be articulated, might be said during this first meeting? You know, Will brings a famous Hollywood superstar to his sister's birthday party. Will people feel surprised, shocked? Will they recognize her? Can I get a selfie? You won't believe what happened. I want to make a toast. There you are. We already have some lines of dialogue, and I love the selfie one. Yes, that's a good one. Can I get a selfie with you? My friends won't believe you were here. Yeah, that's great. And then, of course, you can play the conversation and they can check. But you also want to hear their own lines of dialogue. And this is very creative because they're imagining a whole conversation from the context that you've described. The next activity comes from the same source, so that you know. And it's Honey's birthday. It's a different activity in a different lesson. And Will brings a date with him, none other than the famous Hollywood star, film star, Anna Scott. Okay, so before you watch the video, how do you think the guests of the party will react? And make it difficult or awkward for Anna. So this is a further clue. It's a prompt of the way the conversation might go. How do you think that people might make it difficult? You know, and students imagine and discuss the content of the conversation. Do you think they will be surprised, they'll be shocked, they'll be cool, rude, polite, formal? What about gestures? What about facial expressions? Will they shake hands with Anna Scott? Or will they try to hug her even, or smile? Now, this is quite an important part of conversational language. The non-verbal communications, shock, surprise, tone of voice, movement, body movements, because when you ask your students to act out conversational language, are they expressive? Can you say yes or no in the texture? Or do they just sit straight as ramrods and they go, hello, how are you? I'm very well, thank you. And you? I'm fine, thanks. Yes, they're a little bit expressionless. And I mean, they're worried about the language anyway. So a good activity to do with that is to ask students to imagine body language and then ask them to mime the dialogue, not without words, and mime to each other how they might react. So separate them in groups and say, you're Will, you're Anna, you're Honey, you're the other person, I can't remember their name. And they go, you know, or whatever, selfie or whatever. Yeah. So they act out the body language. And then when it's time for them to act out the dialogue, you can ask them to add the body language that they rehearsed earlier. So adding body language to words is quite an important part of communication, because in the real world, that's how we interpret things. We don't interpret things just with words, but with the expression of the person, this tone of voice, the kind of gestures they make or don't make. So this is quite important. That's my next idea. So imagine it's the same idea I just give you here for a children's book. You can get the learners to imagine it from images or from phrases. Yeah. So these are two children, their dad, and they're thinking about snow. You know, what ice skating. Okay, so give them a few expressions and get them to imagine a conversation. Get them to act it out. Give them some words, or don't give them words, just give them the picture. It's up to you and what you know of the strengths of your class. If your class is a strong one, they probably won't need the expressions, but giving them the expressions gives them a little bit more scaffolding. The same idea from the dialogue that I showed you earlier, from images or phrases. You remember the secretary dialogue. These words come from a conversation. Sir, been reading. Silly book, none, finished. 3, sir. Going to do, fired. So that can generate a conversation, and then you can play the actual dialogue to your learners. So what you need so far, you know, the things that I've tried to promote is firing up the learner's imagination and kind of putting the creativity DNA, which we all have, in motion to generate new, fresh, unpredictable language and not just regurgitate language in the book. I like this one as well, and I'm using the dialogue from Notting Hill as well, because by now you know a little bit about it. And you explain the situation. This is the first meeting of, you know, Will brings Anna Scott to his sister's birthday, and she's a famous Hollywood star. And so H is Honey, B is Bella, the hostess, Bernie is the host, the one with the apron. Max is the friend on the left, and Anna Scott is A. So who do you think said these lines? Dear Lord, you're the spitting image of. So tell me, Anna, what do you do? Christ, what's going on here? And so on. So can you imagine who might have said what? There's lots more phrases, but what is the purpose of this activity, do you think? So students predict who might have said it. How does this activity help you develop listening skills later? She said, take an opportunity to have a sip of coffee. No one's speaking to me. All right, I'll answer my own questions, whatever you like. Okay, so first of all, it is an opportunity to input any idiomatic language like spitting image of. Yeah, so they're learning it. And also to give them the opportunity to do some prediction, to motivate them to listen later. And then when they're listening for the first time, to check whether their predictions were correct, to modify it or verify, or, you know, kind of reject their predictions, whatever they predicted was wrong or right, and kind of put things in a context. And this is the video clip from Notting Hill. You might want to watch it.
Hello, I'm Scott. Have some wine.
Thank you.
I'll get it. Red or white? Hi. Oh, yes, happy birthday. Your brother's brought this in.
Hi, guys. Oh, holy fuck.
Hi, this is Anna. Anna, this
Sorry
is
about
Anna,
that.
she's my baby sister.
Hi. This is one of those key moments in life when it's possible you can be really genuinely cool, and I'm going to fail just 100%. I absolutely, totally and utterly adore you. And I just think you are the most beautiful woman in the world. And more importantly, I genuinely believe, and I believe for some time now, that we could be best friends. What do you think?
Lucky me. Yeah, well, happy birthday.
Oh, you gave me a present. We're best friends already then. Marry Will, he's a really nice guy, then we can be sisters.
I'll think about it.
It'll be Bernie.
This is a great scene, isn't it? And there's so many layers of understanding you can have. So for example, you could get the students to study the expressions and say what the person is saying is not the same as what the person is thinking. You know, we could be best friends. And Anna Scott says, lucky me. So what is she really thinking? I don't know. Okay. Have you, please watch this film. This is scene and the next scene about, you know, the fortune cookies, whatever, the last brown is really great. And I've used it with many classes. Yeah.
Hello, Anna.
So role play, for example, after this scene, you can you get the learners to imagine a similar encounter in their own culture. A famous person arrives at one of their close family events unexpectedly. How would you and your family react? What would they say? What would they do? What would you do? What sort of body language is common in your culture? So involving a personalization element and a culture you know well, that's a good alternative. Thank you, Lorenzo. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but that's a nice contribution. So it could be pretend you're Italian if you know Italian culture very well. So how the Italians would kind of react, eh? Lorenzo, Italian is very similar to Greek, very emotional, very, very voluble. This is probably an activity that you already know. I make it vanish. Do you know the vanishing technique? Yes, no? No? Okay, so if there's enough people who don't know the technique, perhaps it's worth worrying about. So this is pretty standard, to be quite honest. I've known it for many years, but I watched Scott Thornbury did a similar presentation, 10 standard techniques you can do with dialogues, which are the 10 techniques. I show you the standard techniques in the beginning, but I like this one because learners absolutely adore it. And when you make it vanish, you make it, you delete it gradually. And you say, for example, Angela, you are A, and Katerina, you are B. Read out the dialogue to us. And they begin to read it. What happened? I broke my arm, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, okay, now you delete some words. And you say, Zoya, you are A, and Irene, you are B. And they read the lines. And then you delete a few more lines. Yeah? And you say, Panise, you are A, and Nikki, you are B. So by deleting gradually the dialogue, you help them memorize it. And they just love it. And usually they say, oh, no, not me. But what they mean is really me. Because they like it. It's really exciting. It's fun. So make it disappear. And gradually. And in the end, there is nothing on the board, but maybe a couple of words or a question mark. But they love it. The students really love it. And it can help them learn good content in a fun way, because the disappearing dialogue is a great technique. It's like a magician's trick. My young learners thought I was magical when I did this with them. And they said, how did you do that? They thought it was magic. They were babies. You can use conversational material for micro-listening. That involves a kind of not great technical skill, but a little bit of a technical skill. So you need to be able to find your audio script or video script and mark the minute where you ask the learners to listen to a little snippet of talk. And you can get them to do micro-listening skills training. Some of the ideas here can also be used for further prediction, but let me show you the micro-listening skills training first. So the simplest activity you can do is count the words. How many words can you hear? Hang on a minute. That's okay. How many words can you hear? I'm going to play an audio for you.
But also it's so weird that they'd only know you for that one thing, like you've never existed before.
Did you hear the words? Were you able to count them? I'll play it again. I don't know how I did that. Hang on a minute. I may have. All right.
Hello.
Just a minute.
But also it's so weird that they'd only know you for that one thing, like you've never existed before.
Okay, how many did you hear? Seven, 20. It's closer to 20, yeah, than 7. Okay. Listen to the next one. I need to share my screen with you as well. Hi, Zoya, do you mind turning off your video? Very nice to meet you, by the way. But we're just turning off videos, not for any other reason, but it takes a lot of connectivity. Let me just go to my presentation as well. I switched off my screen because I couldn't, okay, I can do it like that. I couldn't access the audio playing file. The next one is a gap fill. Yeah, but it might be just, this is from the same conversation. Listen.
Well, yes, a lot of very small people kind of used to say hello to me, and that was nice.
Okay, shall I play it again? Shall I play it again? What was in number, what was in A? That's okay. No worries.
Well, yes, a lot of very small people kind of used to say hello to me, and that was nice.
So A is well, says Irini. Well, yes, that's true. And what about B? What was in B? Kind of. Say hello to me. And maybe I might play this again in case you didn't get that, okay? All right, listen. It's not very big, so it's not a big excerpt, so it's easy to replay.
Well, yes, a lot of very small people kind of used to say hello to me, and that was nice.
And that, yeah. So there's repetition there, that and that and that, yeah? So it's important to count the words in the repetition as well, because learners need to understand that natural talk is not linear and it's not clinical and aseptic. Well, a lot of very small people kind of used to say hello to me, and that was very, it's processed on the spot. Let's look at this one. Write down exactly what you hear. All right, now your task is to listen carefully and write the words you hear, okay?
He said, were you really a cat? That's myself. Just pull yourself together.
I'll play it again.
He said, were you really a cat? That's myself. Just pull yourself together.
Do you want to hear it again?
He said, were you really a cat? That's myself. Just pull yourself together.
Okay. By now you should have. Were you really a cat? Were you is more likely, yeah, more close to the truth. And the second part?
He said, were you really a cat? That's myself. Just pull yourself together.
Yeah. So in fact, collaboratively, you got it. And it goes like this. Maybe just pull yourself together. Maybe I forgot a word. You may be right. Okay, you might ask them to identify a reference. No, this is part of a conversation, right? And you're giving them small snippets of that conversation. Later, you will allow them to listen to the whole thing. And by then, they will have identified small parts of it. Micro-listeningly, that word doesn't exist, but I just made it up. What does the number 110 refer to? Can you tell me?
I think, honestly, she was about, by the time of it, she must have been 110. So I'm going to go on and on. It didn't make sense.
So what do you think 110?
Honestly, she was about, by the time of it, she must have been 110.
What does 110 refer to, do you think? Do you want to listen again?
It didn't make sense.
Listen.
Which, honestly, she was about, by the time of it, she must have been 110. They go on and on.
Age, yes. Okay, so from these excerpts that I played for micro listening, can you guess the content of the dialogue? Who is interviewing who? It's an interview, I can give you that. Who is interviewing who and about what? Can anybody guess? You know some words. Were you really a cat? You know the words and that and that and that kind of. I wanted to, you know, a lot of small people used to recognize me, and that was nice. So interviewing an actor, yes, very good. And can you guess what kind of, why did she mention small people being recognized? What kind of film do you think she was? A famous witch in the village, maybe. Maybe she played a famous witch. Yeah. You got it. Halloween. Ah, maybe she played, maybe she was, okay. Anybody else who wants to venture a guess? No? Okay. All right. Well, hold these predictions in your mind. And obviously now we're going to listen to the full conversation. It's a BBC conversation. Do you know who the interviewer is? Did you recognize his voice? No? Okay. Well, let's see if you recognize the people first. I'll play it without sound.
You have had this extraordinary career, and you know, I mentioned the Oscars in the introduction and things, but
So who is it? Who is interviewing who? About what? Let me go a little further. I don't know if there is another image. I don't have another image. Harry Potter, very good. She's being interviewed. And do you know the actress? She's a lady. Not according to Tom Jones, like she's a lady. You know the song. She plays a lady. Ah, yeah. Dame Maggie. Dame Maggie who? Maggie? Smith. Graham Norton, that's right. Well done, Idini. So she's being interviewed about Harry Potter. Do you know what else she played? Let's see if you can guess. Listen to the interview, and then you can see what else she played.
Oscars in the introduction and things, but Harry Potter weirds me. But that didn't change your life in a way.
Well, yes, a lot of very small people kind of used to say hello to me, and that was nice. It's a whole different lot of people.
Yes. But also it's a way that they'd only know you for that one thing, like you've never existed before.
No, I never had. Except one kid once said to me, he said, were you really a cat? And I had myself say, just pull yourself together.
Actually,
So,
just like
so
I
that
heard
was the
myself.
happy part of your life, which kind of changed your life. But then Downton comes along. Keller. Is that one of those things where you thought you were famous till you were in Downton?
So, do you recognize her role in Downton Abbey? I don't know if any of you have watched Downton Abbey. It's not downtown, it's Downton, but it's the name of the place. Yeah, and she played the Duchess or something, Dowager or whatever you call them. She's the big mama. I don't know if her name's Helena, but she is quite a formidable character. Actually, there's a lot of Maggie Smith on YouTube where she delivers some adorable aphorisms, very, very funny, which people just waited to. Actually, people watch Downton Abbey for her aphorisms. Like, somebody said to her, let's go over at the weekend. Yeah, Sarah's grandma. And she said, what is the weekend? Because she was an aristocrat. They didn't have weekends. I mean, they didn't work. They'd never done a stroke of work in their lives at the end of the 19th century. What are you talking about? So, yeah, so you can play the whole thing to check. And this is it's an authentic conversation. But I'm not really, you can, and you're using it, this time you're using it for listening input. Yeah. And obviously you will continue to do other activities for listening later on. You might even give them a full transcript later on to do some work on the transcript, which I'm going to discuss later. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is using material from authentic sources for micro listening skills training, and then later on for listening. And this is a conversational sample, which was a coursebook dialogue that one of my trainees animated. It's called animation. So what she did is she went to normal.com and she uploaded the dialogue, and with the characters they provide, she animated it. This was a coursebook dialogue that will usually sound like two headless chickens are talking to each other. That's what coursebook dialogues are like. No facial expression or nothing. But she felt, I don't want to play it like that, but I'm going to get two characters to talk about it. And she did this.
So, John, what are we going to do tonight?
I was thinking, what about having dinner with my parents?
Well, actually, we could do something different for a change.
Okay, you're right. How about going to the cinema?
Sure, why not? But which movie are we going to watch?
Mary told me that the new James Bond film is very good.
I'm afraid I can't agree with you. I think it's just another boring James Bond movie.
I'm not so sure. I think that you're exaggerating. James Bond movies have always been blockbusters.
You're possibly right, but I don't find action films really entertaining.
Well, you have a point there. What should we?
So, in this case, I think I remember now. I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. What was it? Linda, who did this, she did not upload the audio, but she wrote the dialogue and the automated voice characters played it out. So if you write a dialogue of your own and you don't want to read it with your own voice, there are now newer programs that really read conversational material really well. And they can help you identify, they can help with pronunciation because they're not all perfect. And sometimes people want to they would prefer to have some other voice and maybe someone more with a close to native accent or near native accent speaking the lines as a model, okay? And this one was from normal.com, but there's another newer app which it's called Plotagon, and I will share, and that also creates animated material. I'm going to share my screen momentarily with you, just the whole screen, just to show you Plotagon. This works on your desktop, but it works as an app as well. And this is a dialogue that someone inputted. Hi, I'm Lisa from Plotagon. And this is Plotagon Joe, and he looks happy. And I'm Joe. So she did that, and this is how it plays. I think. Oh, I can't do it. I can't actually play this one, but these are some examples of what you can do. You can create people, you can change their hair, their looks, their eyes, the coloring, the clothes, the height, the shoes, everything. And then it's for a teacher, it's $27 a year or $3 a month, which is nothing. You can create a lot of wonderful material in your school or for your private practice for very, very little money. Okay, so I know that teachers usually don't like to pay for things because we're not paid very well in some ways. But I think for something as wonderful as this, it is worth paying a little bit of money. And I'm saying that from experience because the predecessor of normal.com, that used to be called Extra Normal, and they closed down because people, you know, they were offering a lot of free subscriptions, but they just couldn't maintain the costs of their company, and they had to shut down. And I lost a lot of content that I was creating. So when a company closes down and you've created content, it just disappears. Anyway, that's a point besides for anyone interested.
So John, what?
This one I created, as I said to you, in Second Life with, but that's another kind of level of skill required. You need to be able to handle virtual worlds. You need to be able to create avatars. And in this case, the office that you see, I built it from materials in Second Life. And I created the computer screen that said DEA. It wasn't part of the scenario. So you need building skills as well. And it's not automatically created. But there are these two easier services like normal.com and Plotagon that you can do very similar stuff. You can animate materials without tech. So, for example, in this conversation, in this lesson, which I taught was a very young junior level teacher, you can see that on the board, I have a conversation. And also, I built a scene on the board. This is a big cup. This is a chair. And this is a conversation, a dialogue in the kitchen. Sorry, I'm missing your comments in the text chat. No, the scenarios, you can make your own scenarios. You can write your own dialogue, Lorenzo, in Plotagon. I'm sure they have some ready-made scenarios as well. You can choose the scene that you want. Is it in the office, school, in the street, swimming pool? I don't know. And you can buy scenes. So this one, in this one, I had the students order the pictures of the conversation as I read it. But as you can see, I had a little mouse that as the conversation was playing, I moved the mouse. So I animated the conversation with a moving cutout of the mouse. And at the end of the story, the line of the dialogue, which I don't have the audio of, says, "Help, help, it's in my cup." And so I put the cutout of the mouse in my cup, which is when my young pupils said, "Oh, did you do that, miss?" Because they thought that was another magical trick. Cutouts are wonderful for animation. If you teach in a physical classroom, they're absolutely wonderful. On the top left-hand and right-hand picture here, you can see the children acting out a dialogue, and the third child is the mouse director. He's moving the mouse on the board according to what they are saying in the dialogue. So we had 2 actors and a mouse director. I don't know if you like that, but I thought that was one of the best lessons I taught in my life, despite the fact that I've done a lot of other lessons. Anyway, moving on. You can use dialogue extracts from authentic conversations to teach the learner about implied meaning. So, for example, in this one, A says, "So, can you please come over here again right now?" You can actually play that for your students. "Well, I have to go to Edinburgh today, sir. How about this Thursday?" And you get the students to write down what can you deduce from these 3 lines? What is deducible? It's not the end or the beginning of the conversation. Neither A nor B is in Edinburgh. It is neither Wednesday nor Thursday. What else can you deduce? Can you deduce anything else about who A, for example, is and who B is? Maybe? No? Okay. So maybe A is the boss. Yeah? Because B calls him sir, but he doesn't call B sir. So there's a difference in power structure. He says right now, he has a commanding tone, right? I have to go to Edinburgh today, sir. And we can deduce that, B won't stay there for long, yeah, because he says, "How about this Thursday, right now?" So he's not planning to stay in Edinburgh for a long time. We can deduce that B no longer in the office, he's left. Yeah, maybe he's working from home, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of deductions we can make on just by just sharing a few lines of conversation. Sorry, just a minute. I think. May I ask? Okay, Monica Brody. I'm sorry, Monica. I've muted your video and your audio. You can turn it on later again when we have a discussion. Is that okay? Okay, here we are. This is another idea that I took from Scott Thornbury. Coursebook dialogues tend to be a little bit stilted sometimes because they're cleaned up. And this is fine because, you can't necessarily acquire language from a dialogue between Graham Norton and Dame Maggie Smith. If you're a beginner, you need to clean that up. But you can train as the students go up a little bit in the levels. You can help them make dialogues more natural. So, for example, you have this coursebook dialogue here. "Hello, what's your name?" "My name is Juan." "What is your nationality?" "I'm Venezuelan." "What is your job?" "I'm a student." this doesn't sound like real talk. So you can get your student to add things, yeah? How do you like this idea? Making that dialogues more natural. You can even get your students to add themselves into the conversation and rewrite the conversation or add another character, maybe a famous celebrity, I don't know, whatever. But that's much more creative. They have to recreate talk. An activity that's called questions, please, which we've lost, but I will find it momentarily. I'm going to move on to pronunciation focus. Questions, please, is an activity where you give the learners some elements from a conversation. Like, for example, I'm going to go back to one of the previous, this conversation here, yeah? And you can ask me, I'm sorry, as many questions that I can answer with yes or no as you like. Can you type up a question about this conversation that I can answer with a yes or a no? And I will tell you the truth because I've drunk the truth serum. So, for example, is the secretary's name Julia? No. Can you ask me another question? In the text chat, please. Is she doing her job? No. Yes, Katerina, she's at work. No, she hasn't finished. Yes, she is, Kelly. Obviously, you know the content of the conversation now. This would be used as prediction, yeah? Like pretend you don't know it, because do me a favor. So you could be asking, is she reading the diary? Is she going to a party after work? I don't know, maybe. Is she the boss? No. Is her boss there? No. Does she like her job? Yes, because she doesn't do much, and so on. From the answers that I give to my learners, they are then asked to recreate the conversation and to tell me what happened in the conversation and possibly to even act it out. Yeah? So that's called questions, please. And it's an idea that I got from a book called Learning to Listen by Michael Rost. I use it a lot, both for conversations and for texts, in which case the students recreate the text from my answers. And then I ask them to read the original text. So it's a great prediction activity because the student can ask as many questions as they like, and the teacher will answer truthfully. You can also use dialogues with a pronunciation focus. So you can use them to teach turn taking. When you hear people conversing in Italian, for example, or in Greek, there is no turn taking. Everybody talks over everybody else. There's overlapping turns. But that's not true in English. You have to wait for the other person to stop or to indicate through their intonation that it's time, they're ending their turn. You can teach them about conveying attitude through intonation. You can teach them about given versus new information. What do we stress? We stress more given information, things that we already knew, or new information, things that we already want, things that we want to stress. And you can teach them about different connected speech features. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So, for example, this is rereading a dialogue, like the dialogue we had with the secretary. Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? I've been typing, sir or madam. Typing? You haven't been typing. You've been reading that stupid novel since you got here. So, what you say to your students, read your lines with an attitude. You're Catherine, you're the boss. Let the others guess it. Don't tell them, okay? So one student reads, or you can feed in the attitude secretly to one of the players. So one of the players, I'm now being the boss. Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? So what attitude did I pick? Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? Maybe confused. Okay, maybe I did sound a little confused. I was ecstatic, in fact, because I'm in love with Catherine. Or, Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? What attitude was that? Yeah, suspicious. If you give students cards like this one, they can repeat your dialogues until they're blue in the face. The secret is not to say what attitude they picked. And the others have to guess, oh, you were angry, oh, you were, what have you been doing all morning? Oh, Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? And they can learn attitudinal intonation, which is very difficult to teach otherwise. If you don't have these pictures, you can choose adverbs, or you can choose adjectives if they don't know adverbs. So, Catherine, what have you been doing all morning? So you see, I've changed my attitude. Memorization is important, but it's boring if it's not done in an interesting way. So get them to memorize dialogue and to learn that intonation can change the meaning of lines completely. All right, any comments about that? Do you think this is something you can use with boring course book dialogues? Maybe. Okay. Now, this one comes from a book that's kind of out of print, but I salvaged it because I like the idea. You remember I talked about turn taking? And I should really be wrapping up soon because it's 2:30. Has she finished talking or not? So this you can see the image of a cassette. There were cassettes at the time when that book was published, and it's kind of puff, gone into dust. Listen to these people. They're talking to Nancy. Have they finished their sentences or not? So if they're finished, you have to say thank you. If they haven't finished, you have to say, So you're teaching them kind of back channeling language, because when students talk to each other, they don't back channel, they just sit and look at each other. But, you know, in the real world, we say, really? Oh, no. So this one is a beginning of that. Excuse me, which is the way to the British Museum? You go along the street and then turn left, and you see that the voice goes down. And Nancy says, thank you. But in the second example, Excuse me, which is the way to Leicester Square, please? Well, you turn right here, and Nancy goes, uh-huh. And then you will see Leicester Square right ahead of you. And then you say, thank you. And this is a great lesson to begin when you teach directions and instructions, yeah? It's very easy to adapt to that kind of lesson. So try it and let me know. This is one dialogue that kind of kills some people when I ask them, what's the main stress in each phrase? This is the business about given versus new information. So what's the new information in each phrase? The main nuclear autonomic stress regulates what we think is new or what contrasts with something that was mentioned earlier. So in the first phrase, what's the word that you would stress? Correct. And in the second? Katerina, you remember that one, right? Don't say where it's from. Don't say where it's from. In the second line, yeah. Well, if you stress thought, listen to what it sounds. I thought you wanted to go out. Is there any indication that B is angry? Nikki, is there any indication that B is angry? What's on the telly? The normal thing would be, I thought you wanted to go out. But if you say, I thought you wanted to go out, I thought you wanted to go out, that shows, I'm fed up with you. You always want to go out, but there's no such indication. So this is very good material to teach features of connected speech and to show them how nuclear or tonic stress regulates conversation. I don't have very much time, so I want to kind of wrap up this with a couple of ideas that maybe refer to producing conversational language. So we've looked at quite a few ideas where the students recognize and reproduce or identify features of talk, but now you want them to produce them. So for example, giving them some discussion cue cards gives them an attitude during the whole conversation. For example, the teacher has assigned you a discussion topic. I don't know, should policemen carry guns? I live in Exarchia where policemen throw chemicals in our noses all the time. Probably that's why my throat is kind of scratchy today, because there was a lot of riots last night. Pick a cue card, read it, and during the discussion, try to keep pleasure, Nikki. Keep the card and keep the suggestion. For example, try to involve the more silent members of your group in the discussion. So ask them questions. So what do you think? So any ideas from you? Or the person with a white card tries to keep people on track on the topic. If someone strays, she says, well, this was very interesting, but perhaps we could go back to the topic of discussion. The people with the blue card, they have to be polite. They have to maintain the politeness principle. So even if you disagree with someone, you say, oh, this was a very interesting comment. What a fascinating idea. However, yeah, always starts their opinion with something nice to the previous person, which is not what maybe teenagers often do, is, oh, God, you're an idiot. You don't want them to behave like that. One of my Delta trainees this morning mentioned this one, which I loved, because I told him I didn't have exactly 20, and he said, use this one. He uses this one. So you give your students 5 cards with prompts, and during a conversation, they have to get rid of them. So they choose, each time it's their turn to talk, they have to do what the card says. For example, during the discussion of a problem-solving conversation, you're going to decide on the location of a new supermarket in your town. You see, press spelling errors. I wrote it very fast. They look at their cards and they choose which one to use, and maybe a card that says protest or whatever the previous person said, but begin politely. So if they protest and they do it politely, they can get rid of the card. The first person who gets rid of all 5 cards during that discussion wins. Okay, do you like that idea? I think this is great. You can put different functions on the cards and practice different functional language or politeness principles, or agreeing, disagreeing, politely, impolitely, rudely. Okay, great. Now, okay, sorry, that's a wrong heading. I need to correct that one. They only have one more slide to show you. It's not teaching conversation routines that I'm talking about. I apologize about that. Just a couple of more ideas, but only a couple, about using conversation transcripts. For example, this one is about being polite and using conversation routines and transcripts. I think this was conversation routines and the other one was transcripts. So this one you recognize. The boy says to the girl, would you like to see a movie tonight? And the girl says, no, I can't. I'm washing my hair tonight. What routine is that? Do you recognize it? Cheers, Dimitri. It's a girl trying to turn down an invitation. Is she doing it rudely or politely? Not very rudely, but it's a classic routine. Yeah, she's not very polite, but she's not rude. There's a worse way of doing this, which some of my trainees might recognize. No, I'm not that desperate. Would you like to see a movie tonight? No, I'm not that desperate. And that's a really rude way of turning down a boy's invitation. So, okay, I don't want to end this seminar with a very rude note, but maybe something that relates to conversational transcripts. Conversational transcripts can be mindful language, can be mindful, for example, pronunciation, like listen and underline the stressed syllables, or listen and cross out the letters you don't hear, to associate pronunciation and spelling. Listen and decide if the voice falls or rises in each sentence to alert them to turn-taking conventions. Listen and underline, that's a very specific pronunciation aim. Listen and underline all the letters that are pronounced eh, or listen and delete all the weak syllables, or listen and put a circle and underline all the syllables that are joined together to alert them to connected speech conventions. I think that's about it. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for joining me. It was a really nice reboot for me because of the